I've been hugely lucky travelling the world, visiting many of the planet's most astonishing sights, yet the British Isles remains my favourite wildlife hotspot. In this series, I'm taking a look at the different habitats that make up our unique landscape. And this week, I've come to one of our most important areas of natural beauty, the mighty Peak District.
While I'm here, I'm hoping that I might catch a glimpse of the mountain hare, and I want to catch up with red grouse up here on the moors. But you know, with an environment as rich as this, there's every chance that I might be surprised by something else.
I'm in the Peak District, one of the most spectacular and best-loved wild places in the British Isles.
You know, we always hear about the wonderful biodiversity of the tropical rainforest or the tropical reef. But if you come up into the uplands of Britain, we have our own equivalent, the heather moor. This is an incredible environment that simply teems with life.
The Peak District stretches for over 550 square miles, straddling 6 counties at the southern end of the Pennines. It's divided into 2 parts. In the south is the White Peak, a vast plateau of limestone covered in rolling farmland decorated with dry stone walls. To the north, west and east is the Dark Peak. Here, with its gritstone edges and peaty moors, there's a wilder, more remote feel, and it's the perfect place for me to explore these spectacular heather moors.
It's so easy to walk across areas like this and just see the heather and not realise that there's a whole ecosystem here that's quite unique and very well adapted to this environment. There's a lot going on. Lots of moths and things flying across the top of the heather. The moment you start to look, it's amazing how much you see moving around here. There's a curlew in the distance calling. That boy. That's lovely to see. And their camouflage is amazing. The great thing about being in a car is it is the most incredible hide. The wildlife doesn't perceive me as a threat in the vehicle. For me, this is a real joy because I spend nearly all my time in woodland. So to be able to come out onto the moors like this and have such a wonderful view is quite special. 2 lambs suckling on a ewe there, their tails wagging, they're really happy.
By late summer, these hillsides will be cloaked in swathes of vibrant purple. Heather is actually rarer than rainforest, and 75% of the world's supply is found here in Britain. This precious habitat is a vital breeding ground for a wonderful variety of bird life.
2 golden plovers there in their breeding plumage. Beautiful. Marcus, it's like they got their best bib and tucker on. It's almost their equivalent of a dinner suit compared to the winter plumage.
One species in particular is almost entirely dependent on the heather for its survival, the plump and rather indignant red grouse.
Now that I've stopped, they're all popping up to have a little look. They can't resist having a look to see what I am. There's a male there. What are you? Their heads come up like periscopes above the heather. It's fantastic to watch. I love the colour, that rusty brown colouring is really something. The male bird with a very distinctive bright orange flash above his eye. The hen bird has a very more delicate version just above hers, and there are chicks. They've been around for a couple of weeks, I would think. They're inquisitive and exploring the world, but still not straying too far from mum. There's the threat of predation here from foxes and from birds of prey. It's just lovely to see how the heather is their home, it's their food source, it's their nursery. I mean, it's a wonderful thing to observe. And of course, a grouse moor like this is absolutely full of life. It's its own ecosystem.
The heather isn't just cover and a place for the red grouse to raise their young. It's actually part of their food source as well. And if you take a look at this heather sprig here, it's these young buds here that they like to eat.
Heather is one of just a few plants that can survive on this peaty and infertile acidic soil. Without careful management, it quickly forms dense woody stems with no nutritional value. In fact, red grouse are largely the reason these heather moors exist. In order to keep a healthy supply of grouse for shooting, moor keepers carry out heather burning to keep the plants young and vigorous. At the same time, they carefully preserve areas of older plants for the red grouse and other wildlife to nest in, giving the peaks their distinctive patchwork look. Jeff Eyre is grouse-keeper and manager here at Little Howden Moor.
Jeff, when people come to the Peak District and they look at the countryside, it's all managed, isn't it? It's all in custodianship.
Yeah, every area I look at in the whole of the Peak District, it has a name behind a farm or a person that's looking after it, or probably an estate that's looking after it. Yeah, it's all individually managed.
And since the return of the heather, what changes have you seen in the wildlife?
Oh, crikey, I mean, it's amazed me. I mean, as you've seen today, the place is filled up with lapwings, curlews, every wadie you could think of. It's just revolutionised the area.
It's been a long while since I've been up on these moors, gosh, nearly 30 years now, and I'm astonished at the noise, the wonderful sound of the curlews and the lapwings is quite different to how it used to be.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's alive, isn't it?
The red grouse have to share this favourite food supply with another upland creature that is also specialised in feeding on the poor vegetation.
Now there's a mountain hare. You've got that white stripe on the back of the ear and the white tail. And of course, these hares in the winter, they change their coat to the white pelage for protection and camouflage when there's snow on the ground.
The mountain hare's tail stays white all year, so you can easily distinguish it from its cousin, the brown hare. Its face and body are also shorter and rounder, the smaller surface area helping to reduce heat loss in the cold uplands.
Sometimes when they run and you look at their fur, it kind of shimmers. I'm not sure whether the fur's longer than an ordinary hare's, but it's got a different quality.
They're usually found at mountainous altitudes where food is scarce. Like all hares and rabbits, they eat their own droppings. By eating everything twice, they can extract every ounce of nutrition. I've come to the uplands in the Peak District. It's easy to fall in love with the raw beauty of this vast landscape. And if you look closely, there's plenty of fascinating wildlife to keep you entertained. Patrolling the skies is the spectacular short-eared owl. This skilled predator is one of the few owl species that is active during the day, when you can often see it swooping low or hovering over the dense heather in its hunt for field voles. RSPB Species Protection Officer Tim Melling has offered to take me to a spot where we can get a good view of these wonderful birds.
There he is.
Yeah, there he goes. Tim, these so-called short ears, they're not ears at all, are they?
No, they're just tufts of feathers that they use for display when they're agitated or they're being aggressive towards another short-eared owl. They raise them up and you can actually see them like little ear tufts, but they're not ear tufts at all. No, the real ears are actually on either side of the head. They're asymmetrical. They've got one much higher than the other.
Is that for judging distance?
Yes, it does. It really facilitates the distance in noise when they listen for the rustles or the squeak of a vole.
With one ear lower than the other, the sounds from a vole rustling in the undergrowth will reach each ear at a slightly different time, allowing the owl to pinpoint the vole's location with extreme accuracy.
He's coming in low now over there. Now that is sort of hunting height, so he's just landed, hasn't he?
Yeah, he went down on something.
Yeah, I could see that it thrust its head forward and the talons came out. Yeah.
I could see the vole very clearly. He's picked it up.
This one has just managed to catch one. On the right, I can just make out a smaller owl. It's likely it's a fledgling still nesting on the ground, and the adult has brought the vole back to feed it.
Here he goes.
Oh yeah,
Without the vole.
without the vole.
It's mainly voles they eat, isn't it?
The studies that have been done in Britain show that it's about 87% short-tailed field voles that they eat, about 5% mice, about 5% shrews, which surprises me because there's practically nothing eats shrews because they're so distasteful. And
You're making that sound like a recipe. Very, very stiff-winged flying.
yes. I did that. Did you see? He did the
Yeah.
other one then. The wing clap.
Yeah.
He claps his wings really fast and then just drops like a stone. He did it 2 or 3 times there.
They have the most incredibly vivid, I guess a chrome yellow eye, isn't it? It's
Oh, yeah.
bright yellow.
It is even more yellow than a number plate on a car, isn't it? And it shines in the sunshine as well. You can see it at such great distance.
And I've been able to pick it up very, very clearly through the telescope here. And they're 500 metres away. I mean, it's astonishing.
When they don't want to draw attention to the nest with that superb plumage, those yellow eyes stand out like a beacon. So what she does is she always closes her eyes, not completely,
Squints.
just squints, yes. So you can't see the yellow at all, just the pupil there.
They've got this very, it's hard to describe, imperious look. They remind me a little bit of pictures of Napoleon. They've got like
Yes.
puffed out chest. So when they look around, I'm in charge. That's
And they certainly
fantastic.
are in charge on this moor.
As I start my journey to the eastern side of the peaks, the vast open moorlands become broken up with pockets of woodland. These tend to grow towards the foot of the sloping dales, where the soil is more moist and fertile, creating the ideal conditions for fungi and flora to thrive.
I'm going looking for a predator tonight, and I want to make an animal call to try and entice it with. And a very good material to make that from is a bit of sycamore without any knots. I only need a very small call. And now I'm going to try and loosen the bark off. And what I've done is I've twisted that now so that the bark will actually rotate like so. So I can now take that off. But before I do so, I'm going to cut the notch for the whistle. I'm going to cut straight in, and I'm going to cut up to it like that. Now I can remove that and slice off the air channel for the whistle. Now, below that notch, I need to cut an air channel. So I have to put that somewhere where I won't tread on it. Like that. And now, the nice little slices, I start to make an air channel below there. And then it's a matter of putting it back together and giving it a try and see if it works. And that's all I need. A very high-pitched sound is what I'm after.
With the whistle finished, I'm ready to venture further into the woods. I'm going to track down some badgers. Although they're nocturnal, my plan is to find their tracks in daylight, which will lead me to their set, so that I can return to the right spot tonight.
One of the great joys of being out in the outdoors, particularly in the woods, is looking for animal trails like this one that show animals are going backwards and forwards on a regular basis. Now, I know from experience that this trail is a badger trail. It's got a little undulation to it. It's very well swept. Badgers are like walking wallpaper brushes. They sweep the trails as they go. They can't help it. They've got very long hair. We follow this trail a little way. There are no obvious tracks on it at the moment, but you can see here it's going under this branch. That tells you that the animal that's using this has to be lower at the shoulder and head than this branch is. So clearly this isn't a deer trail. Now, one thing that is a dead giveaway for the presence of badgers in woodland are elderberry trees like that. Badgers love elderberries, and when they come into the woods and go to the toilet, elderberry trees grow. And very often those bushes are found next to their homes, which we call sets. Let's go and have a look. And there you go, I'm not wrong. Look, do you see this little rectangular hole in the ground? That's not made by a human. That is the remains of a badger's toilet, a badger latrine. And all around here you can see others. And this is still in use. There are fresh droppings here. If you get right down, you start to see the ground through a badger's eyes. Every animal that moves along like this is looking ahead, trying to find an easy path through the woods. But to see it from a badger's perspective really helps you to get into the mind of the animal you're following. And you can see where it's leading now. Do you see this massive earthworking? Again, you may be misled to think that that was caused by people. That's the work of badgers, and this is an established badger set. And you can see there the trail, actually, a smooth trail going up around it, and again, more elderberry bushes. This is a typical badger's burrow. You see the entrance there, but there's like a little turn as it comes in. Badgers like to come out and turn through a little angle. So you don't get a hole that goes straight in, which is like a fox. With a badger, you get this little tunnel that goes in at an angle. Badgers have got 5 toes in both their front and their rear feet, and they have claws that show clearly in their tracks. The longest claws are on their front feet because, of course, they're amazing diggers, not only for digging their burrows, but for digging up roots to eat and breaking bark off to find insects underneath. You can see here how they've been digging and how much rock they've dug out. They have incredibly powerful shoulders. I've seen places where they've dug straight into a bank full of flints with absolute impunity. They're just incredible. Some fresh tracks here. Here's the main pad. There'll be a little heel pad, but very often it doesn't show. And then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 toes. And the claw marks for this foot are forwards here, there. Very, very delicate marks. And that would say that that's a front foot with a long claws for digging. You know, I've spent most of my adult life tracking animals, tracking in general, living in the woods, and I still find as much excitement today finding those fresh tracks as I did the first time I recognised badger tracks. Finding a set as active as this is finding a place that you can come back and watch them. And the secret there is to sweep the brush on the trail so there are no dead twigs to step on when you come back at dusk. Find a place where you can sit quietly, where the wind will not take your scent towards the set. And then come back maybe an hour before darkness and just sit very quietly.
I've come to the eastern edge of the Peak District National Park. By day, the area has a wild and raw beauty, but by night, it takes on an almost haunting quality. This is the time that long-eared owls emerge to hunt. their long glides alternating with a few slow wing beats as they search for field voles across the open moorland. Unlike their distant cousin, the short-eared owl, these owls are rarely seen by day and also prefer to nest in areas of woodland. It's in these woods that I've come with local resident Irene Brereton to see one of Britain's best-loved nocturnal creatures, the badger. I'm hoping the whistle will fool them into thinking I'm an injured animal and come out to investigate. Irene's been watching this badger set for over 19 years and feels confident that we're in for a treat.
You've seen a lot of comings and goings,
yes.
badger families.
Yes. I mean, I've seen when there were 4 cubs, 2 ginger and 2 normal coloured.
Beautiful animal.
Yeah, it is. Such an inoffensive animal as well. You know, they just want to get on with their lives, really. They don't want to interact with people.
They've got some movement now. There's one coming out now. Here we go.
And sure enough, we soon catch our first glimpse. The family of badgers emerge from their set. Badgers don't see colour or detail, only movement. So as long as we're still, we can sit and watch these wonderful creatures as they get to work busily foraging for earthworms, grubs and insects.
I think this is fantastic. It's a real privilege to come out and be able to watch a set like this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you think that while we're out here, people are watching, make-believe soap operas indoors, and we've got a living drama in front of us.
I know. It's just fantastic. Yeah. You come out, you never know quite what to expect.
I never tire of this.
Oh, no. They'll always do something a bit different. Yeah.
They are magic animals.
Yeah, they're wonderful, I think.
I think we'll leave them to it, shall we?
Yes.
It's the perfect end to the day. But in the morning, there's plenty more to explore. I'm heading 25 miles north to Stanage Edge, a climbing hotspot at the edge of the dark peak. But who would think it was the middle of summer?
Well, it's a bit misty up here, isn't it? Look at this. Makes driving conditions very, very treacherous. And of course, people walking in the Peak District have got to be good at navigation, because these are exactly the sort of conditions in which people become lost. Once they're lost, they can become exhausted and then hypothermia sets in. So if you're going to go wandering around in the high country here, you've really got to know what you're doing.
Despite the weather, Tim Melling from the RSPB has agreed to meet me here for a bit of bird watching.
I think the fog's got thicker, actually. I can see less now than I could a few minutes ago.
This is actually very good weather for ringoozles. Ringoozles like wet weather for a couple of reasons. One is that it brings all the worms to the surface. In hot, dry weather, the worms migrate down, and worms are the favourite food. So that's the first advantage of it. And the second one is actually from a climbing point of view, because if it's baking hot sunshine, the climbers are out here all the time, and the ringoozles can't actually find a place to settle down for a nest. But when it's raining and wet and miserable, the climbers don't like to climb in that, many of them don't, and that gives the chance for the birds to actually start a nest. So even though it's not good for watching ringoozles, it's very, very good weather for ringoozles.
In the deep fog, I can just make out a wary ringoozle. These birds are really the mountain equivalent of the common blackbird.
It's almost identical to a blackbird, apart from the most obvious difference is the thing that gives it its name, the ringoozle. It's got a wonderful white crescent across the middle of its breast there, which is very, very conspicuous. And it's got a more subdued beak than a blackbird. It's not the really bright crocus-coloured beak, no. It's
like almost a bit of shading on the tip.
There is, yes. It has a shading on the tip, and it's a duller yellow. And it also has a white panel in its wing and a little bit of white scaling. But Ecologically, it's completely different to blackbirds as well. Many of the British blackbirds are resident birds, but ring ouzels are migrants. But they're not long-distance migrants. They go to Morocco for the winter, where they feed almost exclusively on one species of juniper berries. That has a large, nutritious food, and they're very gregarious in winter as well. You get, like we get flocks of fieldfares. In Morocco, they get flocks of ring ouzels.
It's fascinating. I think we just settle in and listen, shall we?
Yeah.
Also, unlike the blackbird, breeding ring ouzels shun areas of human habitation. Their fluty call is a feature of remote places like this.
Very distinctive call, though.
Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4.
But he's clearly fairly relaxed at our presence here, because that's pure song. That isn't agitation call. I said about rain being good for ring ouzels because it brings the worms to the surface, but also it can chill the chicks. So usually when it's raining, the female will actually mantle the young chicks in the nest to stop the rain falling on them. It sounds louder than it is because the cliff acts as a big reflector.
It certainly does. But when I look in that direction, all I can see is white.
Yes.
It's really lovely to see the ring ouzels, and they like to come out into areas of grassland like this to look for earthworms, but they're a bird that can suffer when there's acid rain, because then the already acidic conditions become more acidic, and as that pH level drops, you lose the earthworms, which are an important source of food for them. But there are things that cope extremely well with the poor nutrient conditions you get in these acidic peat moors, and one of those is, to my mind, one of our most beautiful plants. Now this is what I'm looking for. This tiny little plant here. This is the sundew. The colours are amazing, the red and the vibrant green, and the little beads of glue there. And you can see there, if I touch the ends of the hairy parts there, look, they've got this glue that's sticky. And these plants gain a lot of their nutrients by trapping insects. By that means they can live here, because the soil is very, very poor in any other form of food.
I've come to the White Peak in the Peak District National Park. This is one of Britain's favourite wild outdoor spaces, and I'm here to explore the creatures and plants that live in this beautiful landscape.
I just love the diversity of British weather. This is June. You just always have to be prepared, don't you? But of course, rain is a vital part of nature. This is the lifeblood of all the plants and the wildlife around us. We can't live without it. And here in this disused quarry, it's already playing a vital role. You can see down the bottom there's a pond. I find it fascinating, the speed with which nature will reclaim land that's been damaged and regenerate it. It's quite inspiring, really. And I'm sure that in that pond there's going to be all sorts of wildlife. That's nice to see. Look at that little sapling there. That's a wych elm tree. You can see if I pick one of the leaves, that's a good one. If you look at the leaf, it's got like two little spikes either side of the central one. So you get this W, and you always remember the wych elm because of the W shape. That was an important tree in the past. To our ancestors, back in the Stone Age, they made bows out of the wood of that, and you can also use the bark for string.
At the bottom of the quarry is a dew pond, an important habitat for amphibians, so it's no surprise this is where I find Chris Monk, Derbyshire's amphibian recorder.
Hey Chris, how are you getting on?
Oh,
Oh my goodness, look at that.
Chris has a special licence to catch these rare, great-crested newts in order to monitor them.
That's incredible.
These are a couple of great crested newt females. They would have been laying their eggs up until a few weeks ago, mostly in April and May.
They are amazing creatures, aren't they?
Yeah.
They always strike me as almost being from another age.
Well, I mean, amphibians are one of the first species to actually migrate onto the land from the seas,
How did they come to be here in the pond?
Well, when this area was, in medieval time, was turned over to sheep pasture and farms and things spread up onto this area of the limestone plateau, the only way they could have livestock up here was to do lots of field ponds. So there's lots of clay-lined field ponds, dew ponds, some of which are still around today. And basically the newts just use them as stepping stones to come up from the river valleys up onto these sorts of areas.
It's fascinating, isn't it, in that our older ways of working with the land still provided habitat for wild things. And what's the purpose of this incredibly bright colouring?
It's thought to possibly be a warning coloration in the same way as things like bees and wasps had bright colours underneath, or possibly a camouflage from underneath to break up the outline of the newt when seen from underneath, so that when it's in the water.
Because they can't be eaten, they're toxic, aren't they?
Yes, so they have cells in the skin which produce a nasty tasting chemical, so the adults don't get eaten by very many things at all. The main problem is the tadpoles are very delectable for lots of things to eat because they don't have the poisons in the skin, so fish and lots of invertebrates, diving beetles, things like that will eat the tadpoles. That's what keeps the numbers down. That's why we're not overrun with great crested newts.
No. And I'm going to hand this female newt back to you, and
we'll record her presence and go and empty some more of the bottle traps and put her back where she came from.
That's fantastic. They're very good in the water, aren't they? They use the tail to swim. They're just burrowing away into the pondweed there.
Right, let's have a look and see what we've got in the next trap along here. Seems to be another newt.
Another one in there, yeah?
Ah, this one looks like a male. It's a bit late in the season now because they're called crested newts because the males develop a big crest in the breeding season, but that gets absorbed later in the summer. And as we're now into June, the crests have disappeared.
So tell me about their life cycle.
The adults return to the pond February, March time into April. Then they have courtship and egg laying April through to May. The adults will start to be much more active in and about the pond now, and gradually most of them will leave, and by the end of July there won't be any adults left in the pond. They'll be out foraging in the surrounding habitat. And the tadpoles will develop into little newts, and they'll leave about September time normally and go on to land as well. And they'll all hibernate over the winter period and re-emerge in the early spring.
And what do they do on land?
They're mostly active at night. They're out looking for small invertebrates, things like that. They prey on small worms, spiders, anything basically anything they can get in their mouth. They're really quite active predators.
As the fog starts to lift, the ring ouzel finally makes an appearance, perching on a rock which it's using as a singing post. With only the sound of birdsong in the air, it's strange to think this wildlife haven was once a bustling limestone quarry. Since Roman times, limestone has been mined from the White Peak, and the industry left the hills scarred by countless sunken holes and quarries. After the quarrymen left, just a few decades ago, nature has been busy reclaiming the area. Richard Spowage from the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust has been monitoring the animals and flora that have made their home here in Millersdale Quarry.
Essentially what you've got is a quarry company that just abandoned the site, left all the rubble and debris on the floor, and nature has just moved in. And the fortunate thing around here is there's been enough seed source and plant source to actually recolonise this site as a limestone grassland.
And I guess all the nooks and crannies, particularly on the cliff faces, are ideal for wildlife.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, the bird species, this quarry's got jackdaw, but you also get the odd raven in quarries up here, peregrine in a couple of quarries, and even barn owl are moving back into quarry sites.
That's fantastic. Ash trees, a lot of sallow.
Yeah.
It's kind of regeneration woodland, isn't it, really?
It is. I mean, the natural succession would be to ash woodland eventually. It would try to develop into ash woodland. What we're trying to do is sort of hold it back as long as we can, and I don't think that will be forever because it's just not possible. But to maintain these quarry floors as limestone grassland.
Well, it's a pretty unique environment, isn't it?
Yeah.
The meadow ants establishing themselves here.
Yeah, that's right. They're creating these incredible mounds like this one.
Oh, look at that. Oh, that's just covered in thyme, isn't it?
Absolutely covered in wild thyme.
That's beautiful.
It's really a result of creating a microhabitat by the ants. They've mixed up all this really fine soil they've brought up from underneath. And so you've got an incredibly well-drained little mound. And that's what the thyme is really thriving on.
What's that nest there then, Richard? That's a nest there covered in baling twine.
That's a raven's nest. They've picked the most awkward spot.
They're little rascals, aren't they?
Yeah. We used to ring the young, but that site is probably just a bit too dangerous to bring ropes over.
I really get a sense of nature just coming back with this carpet in here and then the trees, and it's taking control again and restoring things.
Yeah, and if you think if we were stood here in the 30s, it would be absolutely bustling with activity. This would be a busy working quarry, and now we're stood here with birdsong all around us and wildflowers all around us. It's just incredible what nature can do, really.
It's fantastic.
The wildlife here owes much to the underlying geology. The limestone that forms the peaks acts as a natural filter for rainwater. This lifeblood that once carved out the hills and dales now trickles through the ancient rocks to create exceptionally pure rivers and streams that provide an important habitat for a wealth of insects, birds and water vole.
Look at that. Brown trout in a crystal clear English stream. That's poetry in motion. It's impossible to come to limestone country and not visit a river. It's one of our most cherished landscapes. Now, of course, the trout are interesting, but like so many predators, they depend on a lot of much smaller prey, and that's what I'm interested in. I want to find out about caddisfly. And to do that, I've got to meet a man down the river here who's a real expert. More than that, he used to fly fish for England, so he ought to know a thing or two about these insects.
The clear waters of the River Lathkill provide the ideal home for the caddisfly larvae, which feed on the debris in the river.
Hello, Stuart. I thought I'd find you turning stones over down here.
Well, there's always a few caddisflies to be found in this area. So it's,
And what have you found?
all types, actually. Thankfully, this river's got a massive array of different species of caddisfly. Basically, you've got two major groups. You've got the ones that live in cases, so perfect camouflage.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, this is actually one of the caseless types. This particular one, you might like this one because this is actually the tiger of the caddisflies. This is a true hunter, and you can see actually
he's trying to bite
my finger. I'm just pleased I'm not a blackfly larva.
Yeah.
As adults, caddisfly resemble small drab moths. As larvae, they spin silk, much like spiders, which they use to stick bits of debris around themselves, forming a protective cocoon which doubles up as camouflage.
And this one's made it out of bits of sand or gravel from the bottom of the river.
That's exactly right. So that one obviously lives amongst the sand and gravel on the bottom. So after 1 year, they will actually mature. They've then got to change into a chrysalis before they actually emerge. But that gives them a lot of problems. A chrysalis it can't defend itself, so it has to find a way to actually protect its body while it's actually developing into the full adult. If it's a cased one, then quite simply, it just seals the ends of the cases up with stones and it actually matures within that. That keeps the predators out. If it's a caseless one, it has to build a small shelter, these small shelters here, and again, that protects it. It's basically built itself a wall and it's inside, totally protected.
Look at that. That it's fantastic. They've got the stonemasonry skills of the Incas, haven't they, really? I mean, that's something else.
What amazes me is that nobody's really seen how he puts the last stone in. If you can imagine, how does he get the last stone actually in place? Where does he get it from?
What can they tell us about the health of the river itself?
They are key indicators to water quality, and if anything goes wrong with the water, obviously these are the first guys to actually feel it, and by actually monitoring these insects, we get a good idea of how good the water is. So if there's been any pesticides in, or if there's any problems with road runoff, these things react to it far, far sooner than a chemical test will actually tell us, because these are actually keeping the ray on the water 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, so they're always here.
I really like it when we can find creatures in the wild that can be used as a litmus to reveal the impact that we have on environments.
Yes, yeah.
And of course this is something that families with children can go out and look for, as long as they're safe with the river, obviously.
Yes, that's how I started, taking things home in jars and looking after them and then releasing them when they hatch into the adults. But the most important thing is, as you said, it's actually the litmus. It's the actual, these are the canaries in the cages that actually help us detect what's wrong with the water and what's good with the water. Thankfully, this bit of river is absolutely pristine. You know, it's A1.
The rivers that are happy sound happy.
Yeah, it's music, basically.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, that's the music of the river, and the river is happy, and that's what we love.
It's a real privilege to have spent time here surrounded by this wonderful wildlife. This constantly evolving ecosystem is a perfect example of how man and nature can work hand in hand to ensure this landscape may be enjoyed for many generations to come.